have loved you. And the scripture comes from the Gospel of John in chapter 15, verses 12 through 14. You probably all can almost recite this by heart without even looking. My command is this: love each other as I have loved you. Greater love has no one than this, than he laid down his life for his friends. You are my friends if you do what I command.
Like our door at home.
There was 3 more people queuing up.
You have to stay out.
Yeah, it does. No room.
I'll ask you a question first. Do you believe that love, all by itself, love has the power to heal?
Yes.
Yes.
I figured you'd all say yes to that, but I'd like to know how and why. How does that work? In what ways?
Because love is God.
Love is God.
Comes from God.
God is love.
Okay, keep going.
Well,
In what ways?
well,
Love that is.
you turn me loose, and I'll just talk for the rest of the hour.
Go right ahead, especially in your line of work.
Absolutely. One of the things we have to learn is to shut up and to listen for the Spirit. And I was with a Marine last week. He was in his 70s, and he was getting a diagnosis of emphysema. And this is where I see it almost on a daily basis. So I just did my normal greeting and just listened to him for a little bit. But he hadn't really, we were just chit-chatting about the military and stuff. And I got up to leave, and he said, "Chaplain, would you come back and sit down? I need to talk to you." And what he was afraid of was having to wear an oxygen nasal cannula and dragging a bottle. He said, "That's for old people." And I'm not ready to be old. So I think love, when it manifests itself, first of all, Brian, you stopped just before Jesus says, "I don't call you servants anymore." But one of the things in chaplaincy we have to do is to put ourselves away and to let them come forward, to make space for them. And that means that I love them more than I can love all of the stories and the things that I would share.
You also said something right there that's an important part of the lesson for today, and that is the concept of the difference between being a servant to God and being a friend. And we'll go into that a little bit more because that's a very important part of this. I think you would agree with me that love, in fact, can heal in many ways. Love can heal relationships. Love can heal a person physically. Love can heal people emotionally. Love can heal people spiritually. Love is a very powerful, powerful presence in the world, and love is, in fact, a healing presence. Now, I'm going to apologize ahead of time because most of what I want to give you today comes in the form of short stories that are provided to me by James Moore out of his book. And I hope you don't mind that too much, but there's some really powerful stories in here that I think you're going to enjoy hearing. But first I would like to say, as far as our scripture is concerned, there are 2 important things we're called to do in that short passage that I just read. The first is that we are chosen for love. We have been put in the world by God to love. That's what we're supposed to be here for. The modern world seems to think that we are here for other reasons. We're here to compete with each other. We're here to dispute things with each other. We're here to quarrel. We're here to fight with each other. We're here to get ahead of everybody else. That's not what Jesus tells us. We are here to love one another. Now, a person might ask a question, and I think it's a legitimate question. If you had the opportunity to speak to Jesus, just exactly what right do you have, Jesus, demanding that we love one another? Where do you get the right to say a thing like that? Well, Jesus' answer is that no person demonstrates love more than a one who lays down their life for another? What did Jesus do? He laid down his life for all of us in a very sacrificial way for everyone. His whole life was a demonstration of that. So Jesus gives us a commandment which he himself completely fulfilled. Okay? Who better can you think of would be the right person to give that kind of a command? There isn't anybody. Second of all, Jesus calls us to be his friends, and this is a very big change from what people felt and believed for a long, long time. People considered themselves to be servants of God, which, of course, was a very high honor. It was something to really consider important. Joshua, King David, and a lot of the people in the Old Testament were often referred to as slaves of God, and they were very proud of that. That was a big important thing. Jesus tells us here, though, you're no longer slaves. You're not servants. You are my friends. And that makes the relationship between man and God a whole lot more intimate than it used to be. See? In ancient courts, in the ancient world, there was a small group of very select, trusted individuals that the king referred to as friends of the king. And these friends of the king had immediate, direct, everyday access directly to the king. Okay? No one else was allowed to do that. Military commanders couldn't do it. Statesmen couldn't do it. Governors of provinces couldn't do it. But this inner circle of friends had immediate access to the king anytime they wanted to. Jesus calls us to be friends of God. And that means we have direct access to God anytime, any place. We can approach in his presence anytime. We're no longer strangers. We are intimate friends. And that makes a huge difference in the way we look at our relationship with God. Norman Cousins, I don't know if you know who he was. I didn't. But he wrote a book called The Healing Heart. It was the result of his own survival of a massive heart attack. And in the book, he gives high praise to the proficiency and the talents of the doctors. But he also says this: while some doctors are brilliant technicians or scientists, they are not all people persons. Oh, do we all know this or what? Having little or no training in communication skills, interpersonal relationship skills, no ability to relate warmly and compassionately to the plight of their patients, and as a consequence, they do not realize how hospital patients anxiously anticipate their visits, hanging on every single word, desperately looking for support and encouragement and love. How much more meaningful is it to have a doctor who not only has a bright mind and talented hands, but also a warm and compassionate heart? When you find that doctor, you stick with that doctor. That's a real valuable find. How much better to have the qualities of a great physician and a great pastor all rolled into one. Well, James Moore provides us with a couple of related stories for this. And again, I hope you bear with me today because I've got a number of these little stories to tell you. A case in point was documented some time ago by a doctor who had a very moving and touching experience with one of his patients. The doctor was a very highly respected heart surgeon. Hi.
Hi.
Students who are late have to sit right next to the teacher.
Okay.
That's funny.
It's stuck because of the weather, so
That's the same as my door's doing.
it works better.
Strong like home. Good morning.
Morning.
Now, the doctor was a highly respected heart surgeon, and he helped his patient with her medical problem. But he had also befriended her with his warm and compassionate Christian spirit. To express her gratitude, the patient gave her doctor a gift. The gift was a really beautiful ceramic heart. A pretty fitting gift for a heart doctor. And attached to the gift was a beautiful message. It was a prayer poem entitled Heart Prints, which is an often quoted poem. And here are the words of that poem. Whatever our hands touch, we leave fingerprints. On walls, on furniture, on doorknobs, dishes, and books. And as we touch, we leave our identity. Oh God, wherever I go today, help me to leave heart prints. Heart prints of compassion, of understanding and love. Heart prints of kindness and genuine concern. May my heart touch a lonely neighbor, or a runaway daughter, or an anxious mother, or perhaps a dear friend. Lord, send me out today to leave heart prints. And if anyone should say, I felt your touch, may that one sense thy love touching through me. Well, Jim Moore says that some years later, some doctor had shared with him the same doctor had shared with him this very touching experience and this powerful poem. He was asked to conduct a graveside memorial service for one of his neighbors. She was a good friend and also happened to be an Episcopal priest. She had grown up in the United Methodist Church, but when she married a fine man who was a devout Episcopalian, she joined his church, and a few years later she became an Episcopalian priest. She had served for a number of years with great distinction until health problems had pushed her into an early retirement, and those same health problems eventually took her life. Well, at the conclusion of her graveside service, Jim shared with her family the story about the heart surgeon and the prayer poem he had been given. He read that prayer poem aloud and commented that their loved one's life had been such a beautiful symbol of this prayer poem, because she had indeed left heart prints everywhere she had been. Well, as he stood beside her graveside and read this prayer poem aloud after the closing prayer of the memorial service, he could tell that, oh boy, the family was really moved by this poem. They were all crying and smiling and touching their hearts at the same time. And after the service, they all rushed to hug him and thank him for concluding with that particular prayer poem. It had meant so much to them. Then the deceased woman's parents told Jim something he didn't know. The woman who had given the ceramic heart and the prayer poem to her heart surgeon friend was their daughter. What a moment, he said. What a moment. He said it was a God moment. In our little church, we call it, in everyday service,
Spirit sighting.
Spirit sighting. That's what it is. So that prayer poem, Heart Prints, simply understands something the Bible has been telling us all along. There's nothing in the world more powerful than the healing strength of love. You can go ahead if you want, and you can put your faith in military power. You can put it in intellectual prowess, if you will. You can put it in economic strength, scientific advances, international alliances, political clout, or a whole bunch of other stuff, if you want to. It's okay. None of those things are bad in themselves. In fact, they all have certain benefits to offer. But the Scriptures tell us that in the final analysis, the answer is love. Love is God's will for us. It's God's plan for the hope of the world, and it's the future of mankind. And Jesus said it most clearly in John 15:12. Dr. Carl Menninger, the well-known psychiatrist, once said that he believes the most tragic word in the human language is the word unloved. Feeling unloved. There's nothing worse. Nothing's more devastating than feeling unloved. Nothing's more destructive than that. So Dr. Menninger went on to say that, on the other hand, love has the power to cure people And he said it has the power not only to cure the ones who receive it, but the ones who give it. And he's right. Love can cure. A heartprints of love can restore and mend and heal. Now, James Moore tells us that he's gonna give us some information here to prove that love can literally heal people physically as well as emotionally and spiritually. As far as healing people physically, do you know that medical science, modern science today, admits it? They will tell you, modern science will tell you, yes, love heals. Love plays a big role in the healing of an injured body. Roy Angel told a story about a particularly affectionate puppy. This puppy liked to hang out around a sanitarium. Well, the doctor at the sanitarium decided to try an experiment on this poor little puppy. Now, this is kind of sad to start with here. She made a small incision on the puppy's leg, and then she bandaged it. And finally, she instructed the people at the sanitarium to feed the puppy when he was hungry, but not to show him any affection, physically or verbally. The change in the little dog was very dramatic and very quick. Whereas before he'd always been energetic and frisky and happy and friendly, he now seemed very forlorn and pitiful. Even more significant, 6 weeks later the incision on the leg had not healed. The doctor then instructed everyone at the sanitarium to do just the opposite. To lavish love on the little puppy, to speak kindly to him, to hold him and pet him, stroke him and love him. Soon the puppy was frisky and happy and energetic again, and the incision had healed very quickly. The point? The healing streams that lie within the body, which may be energized and activated by the power of love, are potent. Potent indeed, perhaps a lot more than we really realize. A few years ago in Sweden, a nurse working in a government hospital was assigned to an elderly woman patient. This patient was a tough case. She had not spoken a word in 3 years. The other nurses disliked her, of course, and they tried to avoid her as much as they could. Basically, they just ignored her and stayed away from her. The patient sat there in a rocking chair rocking all day, never saying a word. So one day, a new nurse came along and decided to try what she thought was unconditional love. So the new nurse pulled up a rocking chair alongside of the old lady. And she would sit there and just rock with her. And occasionally she would reach over with her hand, gently touch the hand and pat the hand of the lady. And after just a few days of this, the patient suddenly opened her eyes, turned and said to the nurse, "You're so kind." Mm-hmm. The next day she talked more, and incredibly, 2 weeks later, the patient was well enough to leave the hospital and go home. Now, of course, it doesn't always work that way, but studies are accumulating to show more and more and more, without question, that love has healing power. I know you've all heard of the poet Elizabeth Barrett, right? Mm-hmm. Oh, everybody's shaking their heads even though they have or not. Anyway, she was an invalid for many years. She was unable to leave her home. She was so incapacitated. But then one day she was visited by a man named Robert Browning. Okay? And it was love at first sight. In just a few visits, he brought her so much joy and happiness that she began to show a marked recovery, and eventually she was strong enough to elope and move with him to Italy. This should tell us something. It's no wonder that people were physically healed when coming into physical contact with Jesus. He was love. He calls us to be the same. Love incarnate. Love made flesh. Love personified. Love lived out. So it's not hard to understand that Jesus was able to heal the way he did because he was, in fact, love itself. Well, secondly, love can heal emotionally. Some years ago, when Jim was serving a church in another state, by the way, he has a big church in Dallas, Texas, so this would have had to have been in another state. A man and his wife came to see him one day. They were very burdened, worried, and troubled. It was obvious. He could tell that they had both been crying. And the man spoke first. He said, "It's our daughter Betty. She's 18 years old now, and we're just worried sick about her. She has absolutely no self-esteem at all. And she has gotten a bad reputation around town." "Reputation?" he asked. What do you mean?" "Well," said the man painfully, her self-esteem is so low that any time a man pays any attention to her," and his voice trailed off and he began to sob. And then the man's wife said it very bluntly, "Jim, she can't say no to any man, and now she has this terrible reputation. It's all over town. We're worried sick, we're scared to death, and we're at the end of our rope. We don't know what to do with her. She's really very emotionally ill and she needs help." Well, Jim met with Betty, and he said they were right about her self-esteem, okay. It was non-existent. She walked all slumped over. Her hair was dirty and scraggly. Her clothes were unkempt. She could not look you in the eye. Most of the time she just stared at the floor. When she did look up, her eyes darted around like a scared rabbit. She was a pitiful state. So he brought in a psychiatrist, and they both worked with this girl for some time, but you know what? They didn't make any progress at all. It just seemed like one of those hopeless cases. But then, an amazing thing happened. These are true stories, by the way. An amazing thing happened. A new young man named Jerry moved to town. And for whatever reasons, he fell in love with Betty. He said, "Betty, I know about your past. I know about your reputation. I know the names they call you. I've heard all the rumors. But I also know that I love you. And to me, you are beautiful." Well, he kept telling her these things. "I love you. You are so beautiful." And pretty soon, she started believing him. And she began to stand up a little straighter. She put on a little makeup. She combed her hair. She bought some new clothes. And she did something else, Jim said, that she hadn't done in years. She started smiling. Not long after, he performed their wedding. Mm-hmm. And then shortly thereafter, he moved away to another city. A couple years later, he was invited to come back to that church to preach one Sunday. And as he walked toward the sanctuary, he passed through the children's building, and he saw Jerry coming out of a Sunday school classroom. He had been teaching a children's class. And with him was this gorgeous woman. She looked like a model, tall, stately, poised, and radiant, and I thought, oh my God, he's divorced Betty and he's got somebody else. But he was wrong. You know why. As he drew closer, he realized that the gorgeous, radiant, confident woman who had been helping Jerry teach the children in Sunday school was none other than Betty. See, he could hardly believe his eyes. And deep down in his heart, he hummed the doxology. Betty had been transformed. She had been restored. She had been made well. And it was all due to the power of love. Love can also heal us spiritually. There was a well-known speaker who started off his seminar by holding up a crisp, new $20 bill. Now, there were a couple hundred people in the room for this seminar. And the speaker asked them, How many of you folks out there would like to have this $20 bill? Well, shoot. Hands went up all over the place. The speaker said, I'm going to give this $20 bill to one of you. But first, I want to do something. And so he grabbed the $20 bill and crumpled it all up into a crumpled up ball. And he held it up and he said, who wants it now? Hands went up every place. Well, he replied, what if I do this? He dropped the ball on the floor. He stepped on it. He ground it into the floor with his shoe. And he picked it up for all to see. It was all crumpled and smudged and dirty and crushed. And he said, now who wants it? Hands went up all over the place. And then he said, my friends, you have just learned a very valuable lesson. No matter what I did to the money, you still wanted it because it did not decrease in value. No matter how smudged and rumpled it became, it was still worth $20. What's the lesson?
You're worth a lot more than that
To whom?
to God, and it should be to people.
Y'all catch this all right? Okay. The point?
Well, who'd you give the $20 to?
Oh, well, it doesn't say.
Oh, you're not even finishing the
He probably
story.
stuck it back in his own pocket, you know. So what's the point? Okay. Many times in our lives, we get knocked around. We get dropped. We get crumpled up and smudged. Sometimes we even get stomped into the dirt, right? Maybe it was just the circumstances at the time. Maybe it was through no fault of our own. Maybe it was our own fault. And we end up feeling damaged. We feel useless, worthless. We feel like we're of no value anymore. But no matter what happens, whatever will happen, you will never lose any value in the eyes of God. To God, doesn't make any difference whether you're dirty or clean. Doesn't make any difference whether you're crumbled or smooth. You're still, in fact, priceless as far as He's concerned. And it doesn't have anything to do with you and I being good. It's got everything to do with God being good. We got a great word for it, don't we?
Love. Grace.
Grace.
Yeah.
That's it. God's grace. And it's the only way we can become spiritually healed. Apologize again for all these side stories, but they're absolutely necessary.
Oh, great.
In his book, Come Share the Being, Bob Benson writes about God's incredible grace and the amazing ways in which God shares Himself with us. This is what he writes. Do you remember when they had old-fashioned Sunday school picnics? Everybody here is old enough to remember that, right? Almost. It was before air conditioning. And they said, well, let's meet at the Sycamore Lodge in Shelby Park at 4:30 Saturday. You bring your supper and we'll furnish the tea, and we'll all have a great fellowship together. But you came home at the last minute, and when you got ready to pack your lunch, all you could find in the fridge was one dried up piece of bologna and just enough mustard at the bottom of the jar so that you got it all over your knuckles trying to get it out. And there were just 2 pieces of stale bread. So you made your bologna sandwich. You wrapped it up in a brown bag and went to the picnic. And when it came time to eat, you sat at the end of a big picnic table and spread out your sandwich. But the folks next to you, the lady was a cook. And she had worked all day, and they had fried chicken and baked beans and potato salad and homemade rolls and sliced tomatoes and pickles and celery. And to top it all off, 2 big homemade chocolate pies. And they spread it all out all around you. And there you were with your stale bologna sandwich. But they said to you, why don't we just put it all together? Oh no, I couldn't do that. I couldn't even think of doing such a thing. You said very embarrassedly. Oh, come on. There's plenty of chicken and plenty of pie and plenty of everything. We just love bologna sandwiches. Let's just put it all together. And so you did. And there you sat, eating like a king when you came like a pauper. What's the point? Anybody want to take a shot?
Oh, they shared. They shared. Yeah. Or it's like the fishes and the loaves too. You know, there wasn't enough food and it appeared, and Jesus works miracles, I guess, or in people.
Where your heart is.
Pardon?
It's where your heart is.
Okay. Let me put it to you this way. We bring our little, and God brings His much. And in His grace, God says, let's just put it all together. All we have to do is accept that offer in faith. One last comment before we end for today. And by the way, next week we are going to continue talking about love as we look at the 13th chapter of Corinthians and we hear what Paul has to say about love. The point is obvious. We bring our little, God brings His much, and in His grace we put it all together. God has a banquet for us when we are hungry. God has healing for us when we are hurting. God can satisfy the hollow emptiness within us. God can make the wounded whole. God can heal the sin-sick soul. Sounds like a hymn.
Yeah.
And through the power and the healing power of His love. And Jim ends this lesson by saying, love is the most powerful thing in the world. So love one another as I have loved you. Thank you.
Thank you, Brian.
Thank you, Brian.
Yeah, a long and really, that's the name of the song.